Can we take our seats? And if you haven't realized so far, we are starting a new series this month. The series is The Promise, and it's part of the Advent Christmas season series. This is the first one. I think there are three messages in this series. And we've already kind of started this morning with a lot of words, even during worship, about this promise that is there. So today, the topic is when the need is urgent and God delays. There are many stories I think of when I think about this. One of my favorite stories is something that Lisa spoke about a few weeks ago. Jairus comes to Jesus and says, "No, can you come? My daughter is dying." And he is desperate for Jesus to come, and Jesus is going in this rush, and somebody had to touch Jesus at that time. And Jesus, not ignoring it, stops and says, "Who touched me?" And this delays. And this delay causes his daughter's death. And then Jesus does a greater miracle. Okay, and when I think of delay, that's my favorite story, Jairus' daughter. But today we're not going to talk about Jairus' daughter. When we talk about promise, the word promise is emotionally somewhat laden, as in it's heavy, and a lot of us think of a lot of words associated with promise, something to do with commitment. Sometimes if you're wounded, you think about betrayal and disappointment associated with promise. And sometimes you think of, a lot of people think about having to wait. Why do you have to promise? Why can't you just do it? Why do you promise and then wait for some time before you have to do it? This building up of the suspense and climax is not very exciting. But that's part of this promise. And God does a lot of things by promise, okay? And there is a reason for it. And this series, we will cover a lot of this. And before I get to a short story that I'm going to say today, there is a lot of context that needs to be given, okay? So the first part, okay, we're going to have intermissions. This is not that long, but we're going to have an intermission. The first part will primarily be setting context, okay? Then we'll have a short intermission where we'll have a breakout, and then we will get into a very short story, and then we will finish today. So there are disclaimers, and this is a disclaimer that is true for almost all sermons, but more so today. We will get to, at the end, we will come back to this disclaimer. Why is it? We are trying to bite more than we can chew. Okay, we are trying to grasp things that are way beyond our competence or comprehension or capability. We are trying to do something very big. Okay, and the only reason we do it is because the author of this whole project is willing to reveal things to us. Okay, otherwise it is completely insane to try and understand this scale of things with our finite understanding of things. And we also need to understand, right? Even among us, we often think some person has a better understanding of things than me. He is probably better and he knows more, and none of that matters. Because the only revelation that matters is what he gives us. Okay, and so if you feel, I don't know all of these things, or I don't understand all of these things, I've not read all of these things, it doesn't matter. There are stories, and these stories will speak to you because the book that we read is alive, and God speaks to us through this book. Okay, that's some PPT mishap. There are many, many promises, right? So right now we're going to talk about the promise of the Messiah, or when Jesus was born, he did not come just like that. There was a promise and a long period of waiting for his coming. And there were many, many, many promises about Jesus coming and his life, how he would, how he would be born, how he would live, how he would die, how he would rise again, how he would build the church. All of this was already planned throughout history. And the first promise that was made was in Genesis 3:15. Immediately after Adam and Eve sinned. Okay, so Adam and Eve were the first people who were created. They were in a garden which was so good. There was only one thing they were not supposed to do. They were not supposed to eat of one tree that God said, do not eat of this. But obviously, he had to do it. So, not he, she had to do it. So she did and gave it to him. I'm kidding. We know Adam was standing right next to her while she did it. Okay, and the instruction was given to Adam, not to Eve. Okay, so yeah. in any case, they sinned. Okay, and the moment they sinned, right? This passage in Genesis 3 is so intricate and detailed. It's so nice. If you get the time, please go read it. And it says they realized they were naked, and what did they do? They covered themselves with leaves. Okay, and they covered themselves with leaves. They stitched themselves with fig leaves, I think, specifically. And then Jesus came. Okay, and it says they were afraid because they were naked, but they covered themselves. And they went again and hid, even though they covered themselves. Okay, so clearly the fig tree or the fig leaf dress was not sufficient. Okay, and so God had to do something else. And God comes and says immediately, and this is the first God telling about Jesus Christ. It's not that he didn't know before. Even before he created, he knew this was going to happen. And he goes and tells this first promise, okay, that to who does he promise this to? The serpent. Can you imagine how ironic it is that God talks to the devil and promises that he will die? Okay, it says, the heel, you shall bruise his heel, and he will bruise your head. And obviously, your heel bruise is much lighter than your head getting crushed. Okay, so that is the first promise. Okay, and through the Old Testament, if you read, till you come to Malachi, there is one last promise, okay, which is again 4:5-6. It talks about an Elijah coming before Jesus comes. Okay, and this is another promise that God gives about Jesus coming to save. And in between all of this, right, there are many, 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 many promises. Okay, there are promises about his birth. There are promises about, how he would enter Jerusalem, how he would go on a colt. There are promises about how he would be betrayed, to the specifics of how many silver coins will be used for his betrayal and what it would be used to purchase. How he would die, what time he would die. All of that was in there. And where he would be buried. All of that has been recorded in history. So this is the scale of prophecies, right, is humongous. Okay, and I usually, when they give statistics, I get very skeptical, and I try to go analyze all of these things, whether it's really they are conflating things or they're making up these numbers and all of those things, and you study. Even conservatively, if you think, there are about 300 verses that point to Jesus from the Old Testament. Okay, and there was one statistician, again, I was very skeptical about this person, called Stoner, who did some study, okay, of this probability piece. He took 8 prophecies, okay, only 8 prophecies of Jesus Christ, and he saw if these 8 needs to be fulfilled, what is the probability of that happening? Given that there are so many people, some 88 billion people or so who had lived till Jesus' birth. If all of this had to be fulfilled in one person, what is the probability? And for 8 prophecies, the probability was 1 in 10 power 17. Okay, That is a huge number. And the way he explains it, this guy is from Texas. So he explains it as if they covered Texas. Texas is a big state in the US. It's it's a big state, okay? Texas, the area of Texas is about 1/5 of India, okay? If you can imagine covering 1/5 of India with a silver dollar coin, which is like about that big, okay? It's dollar coins. You would cover the entire state of Texas 2 feet high, okay? If you put that many coins there and mark one of them, and the chance of picking at the first try that marked coin, that is the probability of 8 prophecies being fulfilled in one man. Okay? That is for 8. He had, on a conservative side, 300 of them. Okay? And these are not prophecies that that he could control, where he was born, how he would die, what time exactly he would die. All of these things are not things that he had anything in control. So to understand the amount of promises that all pointed to this one man and was fulfilled in this one man is just unbelievable. Okay, there are not so conservative numbers which talk about 574 verses directly predicting things and stuff. But this is not it, right? This is just direct prophecies. There are then prophetic types. Okay, if you look at the Old Testament, there are stories. And there are many stories where there are things that point to Christ. Very commonly used is a Passover lamb that was sacrificed before the Israelites were rescued from Egypt and they were coming to Israel. They had a lamb that was sacrificed, and the lamb's blood was put on the doorpost so that they wouldn't, the messenger of death would not kill the firstborn in that house. And that Passover lamb is a type of Christ. And there are many, again, intricate details in it. Jesus died at the Passover feast at exactly the same time as the lamb would be sacrificed. Okay, then there is the story of Jonah, which we all read, all the club kids would know, and how he was there for 3 days in the belly of the fish. And that is a representation of Jesus being buried for 3 days. Okay, and then there is the story of the Israelites being bitten by snakes because they had done something bad, and then there were snakes, and the snakes bit them and they were dying. And the rescue for that is God did not stop the snakes. God said, put a symbol of a cross with a snake, and whoever looks to it will be saved. That, again, is a representation of Jesus Christ. Right? These are just like some simple 3 types, but I want to go a little more in detail to tell you many more types of Christ. Okay, and this is actually my favorite part in reading the Old Testament, to see how everything points to Christ. Adam is a type of Christ. He was the first man. Because of his sin, because of him, sin came into the world. Jesus is the second man or second Adam, because of whom sin goes out from this world. Abel's blood was spilt on the ground, and it cried out to God for justice. Jesus' blood was spilt, but it brought justification for everybody. Abraham was the father of many nations. He is a type of Christ because Christ is the father of many nations because he brought all nations in a new kingdom. Melchizedek was a priest mentioned in the Old Testament who had no lineage. He came out of nowhere. He is a type of Christ. There are many more analogies to him, but no lineage is one of the things that he is a type of Christ that represents Christ. Isaac is a type of Christ because he was the one who was to be sacrificed by Abraham, the father sacrificing his son. Esau was the elder brother and who gave away his rights, and he is a type of Christ. Joseph was betrayed, sold into slavery, and suffered and came out victorious. He is a type of Christ. Moses was a deliverer. He was the lawgiver for Israel, and in his childhood, he also had the same issue as Jesus did. No, the king was killing all the male children, and he was a mediator. He is a type of Christ. Joshua is another person who is a type of Christ because he is the one who led the Israelites into the promised land. High priests in the Old Testament, all of them are a type of Christ because they were the mediators who could go into God's presence on behalf of the people. Boaz, the story of Ruth, he was a kinsman redeemer who is a relative who redeemed Ruth. David was a shepherd king. He was anointed, he was chosen, and he suffered. He was a type of Christ. Solomon, for his wisdom and the peace he brought to Israel, and he was a temple builder. All of them pointing to Christ. Jonah, and we read about Jonah. Okay, I'm going to stop here because there's a lot of names and there's a lot of stories. And not all of you would know each of the stories. Okay, but these are stories from the Old Testament, each of which profoundly point to one thing, and this is the one person, Christ. Okay? And these are just people and stories. After this, there are many, many, many more things. Noah's Ark. The ark itself is a representation of how God saved his people from the consequence of sin. And from the ark, a new family was born, a new kingdom that would populate the earth, representing the church that would come out of Noah's Ark. Jacob's ladder, that Jacob dreams of angels going up and down, Jesus even talks about it. It is representing Christ as a path to heaven. You can think of manna, which the Israelites got, the rock of Horeb where water came out, the tabernacle, the temple that shows God's dwelling place among the Israelites, the bronze serpent we spoke about, the Passover lamb we spoke about. There is a scapegoat, which they used to do in the Jewish tradition. Every year they would take a goat, they would symbolically lay all the sins of the people on the goat and send it into the wilderness to die. And that was Jesus. There was a tribute lamb which came to Israel, which is like a gift of Israel. The veil in the temple, the thick veil that separated the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, so that people could not enter into the Holy of Holies, because if they entered, they would die. And during crucifixion, this veil tore from the top to the bottom, meaning God tore it. It was not man tearing it from bottom to top. There is no other way to tear the veil from top to bottom. And this veil was not like our curtains. It was really, really thick. It's not something that you can tear. And that shows the body of Christ that was torn to provide access to God's presence. The mercy seat that was between the cherubims, that you could have, that Christ gave us access to. The Sabbath day, or the rest from self-effort that Christ provides. Cities of refuge, no refuge from consequence of sin. All the things that you do, you go into the city of refuge, you are safe, nobody can touch you. All the sacrifices, the burnt offering, the whole offering, the wave offering, all of them point to Christ. All the festivals that they have, festival of booths, every festival that the Jewish thing has, all of them point to Christ. Every priest, every king, every story in the Old Testament points to Christ. There is nothing in the Old Testament that is given that doesn't point us to this Savior. God's grand plan in the Old Testament, all the promises, all the setup was to point to Christ, because Christ is the centerpiece of all creation. There is nothing more important than Christ. As if this wasn't enough, right? Yeah. I want to pick two small stories to say how, again and again I say, the intricate details in these stories that make it irrefutable that the story is about Christ. I like the story because typically you don't think Esau as Jesus, right? Esau is the bad guy. Esau was careless about his birthright. This is the story of twin brothers, okay? And Esau is the elder brother, and Jacob, whose name means cheat, Okay, imagine your parents naming you cheat. They have ruined him at the beginning. Okay, so this cheat and Esau are brothers, and Esau sells his birthright because he was hungry. Okay, and that typically shows Jesus giving his birthright up, his right as the Son of God, leaving heaven, coming down, and suffering. Esau traded it for a bowl of soup, but Jesus traded it so that he could win us. And the way this plays out, right? How does Jacob cheat Esau? He wears clothes like Esau to make it furry so that his father, who couldn't see, would smell Esau when he goes. And we wear the righteousness of Jesus and go to the Father, and the Father sees us as if he sees the older brother. And Esau is Christ. And Esau goes after that to Isaac and cries and says, "Isn't there one blessing you can give me?" And Jesus gave up all that he had, everything he had, to win us over. That is Esau in Jesus. And the other thing, other details about this is the story of Joshua and the whole Israelites moving from Egypt into the Promised Land. Moses is this grand leader, right, who is the deliverer, who went to Pharaoh, fought with him, did all these arguments, made all these 10 grand, what do you call it? Miracles, not miracles, what do you call it? Plagues, yeah, 10 plagues, sorry, thank you. 10 plagues, and then brought the Israelites out. But Moses doesn't take them into the Promised Land. Do you know why? Moses represents the law. And Joshua in Hebrew is Yeshua, is the same as Yeshua, is the one who can take you into the Promised Land. Law will never take you into the Promised Land. It is only grace through Jesus that will take you into the Promised Land, which is why Joshua is a type of Christ. Okay. There are more details. Okay. Pilate. Recently in LG we were talking about this, right? Whenever the Israelites went to sacrifice, they would take a lamb, and the priest examines the lamb and says, "This lamb is good, without blemish. You can sacrifice. It's worthy of sacrifice." The same thing happened when Pilate interviews Jesus and comes out and says, "I find no fault in this man." That is a representation of what the priest would do, Pilate did. And the Passover meal, you should actually listen to some Jewish rabbis explain how the Passover meal points to Christ. Every single thing in the Passover meal points to Christ. And the best thing that I heard in that is they have this bread, or the matzah, okay? And they have, the matzah is grilled in a way with stripes, okay? Stripes on his back. And it is pierced, okay? And that's the bread. And there are 3 pieces of bread. And in a game during the Passover festival, they break the second piece of bread into 2. And they hide one for the children to find something. There are tiny, small details. The second piece talks about the Son of God being broken, and the stripes and the piercings on the bread. All of them, every single tradition that they follow in the Passover meal points to Christ. I want us to take a break. This is the intermission. Okay, I want us to take a break. Maybe gather in 2s or 3s. Think about one promise verse, or one of these stories, one of the things in the Old Testament that point to Christ that is important to you, and why. The reason we do this is we can encourage each other with stories that mean something to you. Okay, I'm just going to do 3 minutes. It's just one verse or one story that means something to you, and share with each other. Okay, we are a little over 3 minutes, so I'm going to. The list that we had here was not an exhaustive list. There are many more characters in the Bible, Did you say other characters or did you talk about other things that were not on the list? I heard Hosea. That was one of my favorite ones too. Anything else? You also heard Hosea, yeah. Esther. Boaz is one, yeah. Any other verses or types that no really some people are still in deep conversations there. Okay. Joshua 1:8, yeah, the verse. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have a question. Did anybody calculate that 300 prophecy status?
So I think it gets to an insane number. So they did 8 prophecies, and then I think they did 100 or 30 something prophecies. That itself gets to 10 power 157. So 300 would be, and as in, this is literally almost impossible. This is the only possibility is, yeah, there is no more. Yeah, yeah. So it's, so I was actually very skeptical about the statistics. No, I went looked up the methods and know how he did and all of those things, and it seems to be good. Okay, we're going to slightly switch gears and see. Now, given this overwhelming set of scriptures that these Israelites had, right, and they watched Jesus, and they still didn't see the promise fulfilled. Why did that happen? Okay, and there are good reasons for it, right? We can blame them for being stiff-necked or whatever words you want to use, but if we were in that place, I'm not sure I would have been any better. Okay, one of the things that they truly believed in was a monotheistic God, that God is one and there is no other, and the God was so holy that they would not even say his name. And when suddenly one man comes and says, before Abraham was, I am, it was blasphemy for them. They could not accept God living among men because they thought God was so high up. Okay? So there were problems. I've listed down a bunch of verses on why they did not think Jesus was the Messiah and what prevented them. Okay, and this is basically reference as to Jesus was supposed to gather all the Israelites together, and he was supposed to rebuild the temple and bring the glory of the temple that Solomon built back to what it should be. He was supposed to bring world peace. He was supposed to make everybody observe God's commandments. He was supposed to create universal knowledge of God among humanity. When we read all this, we think, of course, this is all fulfilled, right? But it did not happen in their eyes. Israelites did not come back together. There was no world peace. There was no universal knowledge of God. None of this happened. And for them to accept Jesus as the Messiah, even with all this overwhelming evidence of everything pointing to him, was difficult. And we do the same things, right? Why do we find it difficult to trust in God's promises or see the promise being fulfilled? Is because of I've broken down all of those things into three things. We have a very poor understanding of who God is. Okay? Again, going back to our disclaimer, we are biting more than we can chew. We will not understand who God is. Okay? But God has revealed a certain amount to us. But the problem is, we then add our own stuff to it. Right? Which is what the Pharisees did. They got revelation of who God is, and then they added stuff. Oh, if this is so, this should be so. And they added many things, and making that, they made it impossible to have a triune God. They stuck to something that prevented them from seeing the promise being fulfilled right in front of their eyes. Often we have ideas of who God should be, right? And we sang the song, break down the walls of all my religion. What is our religion? We have ideas of who God should be, how God should work. No, he is said this way and he has to be this way. And we lock out people, we push out ideas, we say this is not acceptable because we think so. There are some clear directives in the Bible which we will go through, but even the ones that we are not so sure of, we become very adamant and a stickler to those things. And that is when we form this religion and build walls which prevent other people from seeing who God is, and it prevents us from seeing who God is. And we have a poor understanding of God's purpose. What was God's purpose in all of the promises that he had? That Christ would come, and Christ was promised to be a valiant king. Was he a valiant king? Yes, he was, but not in the way we expected him to be. We think of the physical and we think selfish. The Israelites were blessed to bless, not blessed to enjoy. The church is blessed to bless, not to sit here and enjoy all the good people around us and feel happy about it. And that we lose sight of. We lose sight of God's purpose. We become selfish. My job, my promotion, all of those are reasonable things to ask for. I'm not saying that is bad. But the problem is we think God's purpose is that. I keep saying this. God is more interested in your character than in your comfort. It doesn't matter if you're comfortable or not. It is very important that your character is built, because that is what God is interested in. God's purpose is that. But we are interested only in our comfort. I want a bigger car, I want a bigger house, I want the car that he has. All kinds of things that we all the time long for. What is consuming us? I remember conversing with Bert at one point, and he says, what consumes you? And it broke me to realize what actually consumes me. It is not Christ who is consuming me. When that is the case, we lose sight of the purpose of God. We make him small and we make him something that we can use for our own benefit. And God will not let that be. God will still work his way through you. And again, in the beginning we said, right, till the last minute. I often feel it is not God who wants to wait till the last minute. We go to God only when nothing else is available. And only then can God help. So it would be so much better if right in the beginning we say, God, have your way. But it's tough. Right? I'm far, far from it. And we clearly don't have an idea of God's timeline. Right? We want it now. We want it in our timeline. We want it in our lifetime at least. Right? I still remember when my mom was sick, terminally ill with cancer. There were many promises made. Unfortunately, a lot of those promises didn't come through because we tend to believe certain things which are, again, our understanding of God and his promises. And at one point there is a verse in the Bible which says, David says, I will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. We took that literally. He thought this is a promise. My mom will see the goodness of God in the land of the living. What is the land of the living? It is not here. This is the land of the dead. We are all dying. Okay. We're all marching towards death. This is not the land of the living. Right? And that the way we read promises and the way we consume it is very distorted, because God's plan and His purpose is very different. It's painful. I'm no way trivializing the pain that we go through. Losing my mom was not easy. Losing my mom with these false promises was tougher. Going back to this promise piece, right? The promise is not actually what the promise is. It is more about who is making that promise to you. It is more about the person than the promise itself. And we often forget that. We hold on to the promise itself and not the person. So often, we say, do you believe this promise? I don't care. I believe the person who promised. That is bigger and more important than the promise itself. This is the short story, and we'll finish with this. This is the story of Habakkuk. This is a prophet towards the end of the Old Testament. And he's an interesting prophet. What is the role of a prophet? Do you know what a prophet does? Hears from God and tells people, okay, what God says. Habakkuk doesn't do any of that. Okay? The only thing that Habakkuk does is he complains to God. God responds to him. He complains to God again. God responds to him. And then he says something else in the end. Okay? So Habakkuk is like a strange prophet. He is not a prophet who gives God's word, but he is more like me, complaining to God. Okay? So the first part of Habakkuk starts with him questioning. And we love this verse, right? We use this verse. How long, O Lord, will this go on? How long will you tarry? How long will you see evil and not do anything about it? How long should I suffer in this evil world? How long will the enemy be victorious over me? So many things, right? And Habakkuk is saying the same thing. He's like, how long, Lord, will you do? And this is short. And there are like 4 verses where he says, how long will you keep quiet? You seem to be indifferent and inactive and not doing anything about all the crazy stuff that is happening. And he was in a time period in Israel. He is in the southern kingdom where things have gone to dogs, literally. And there's a lot of oppression, corruption, leaders are no sign of God. The Babylonians are literally outside the gates waiting to plunder them. He is asking God, how long, Lord, will you keep quiet? And then God answers interestingly. He says, I will answer. And the answer is Babylonians. Right? That is not the answer he wanted. He's like, what? Really? This is your answer to all the craziness that's happening? You're going to bring even more crazies into this? Right? I'm going to get an even more treacherous, even more cruel and oppressive people to fix the oppression that you see in Israel. So he was really questioning God at this point, is like confused, like, God, really, are you thinking, are you hearing yourself talk? And then God explains about a timeline, right? He says, write it in tablets. I will fulfill and it will not delay. Why is he writing it in tablet? Because clearly it is going to be some time before it is going to get fulfilled. He says, Write it. It will not delay. It will surely come. Okay, and it doesn't sound like a very convincing answer to me, right? Sure, okay, eventually you will do this. But somehow, Habakkuk seems to have caught God's perspective in this. And in the end, in chapter 3, again, you should go read Habakkuk chapter 3. You will see how he is praising God for how great he is. Okay, the first, I think, 15 verses, he talks about how grand and great and powerful God is. And then the last few verses, he says, this is a very famous verse that we talk about. It says, though the fig tree does not blossom, there are no grapes on the vine, no sheep in the stall, nothing at all, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. So what Habakkuk seems to have got hold of was, it doesn't matter what the answer is. It doesn't matter the timeline. All that matters is God. So what we did today is this sequence of things, right? Habakkuk in the first 15 verses of chapter 3 praises God for who he is. And if you look at all the Old Testament promises and how intricately detailed the plan of salvation for you and me God has woven into history, we should be praising and thanking God for it. And though the fig tree doesn't blossom, though there are no grapes on the vine, and there's no sheep in the stall, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. Because we don't trust just his promises, we trust him who promises. I want to call Becky up. They're going to sing a song to close us out. And while they're singing the song is also about it, about how you can rejoice while trusting in God.